Hello, my name is Christian Harris, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and more. Today, we're going to be focusing on a little book called The Orphans of New Lur, the Aether Collection, written by Blake Vanier. Another little tidbit is it's narrated by yours truly, Christian Harris. That's me. It's dropped. You can check it out. The link to buy the audiobook, the ebook, the paperback is all in the description below, so check it out. So, introducing the writer, Blake Vanier. Hi, Blake.
Howdy.
How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. As we all know, that Texas is having they're calling it a snowmageddon, so that's been fun. But you are in the what do they call it, the Arctic North?
Yeah, Colorado.
AKA the frozen north, the Arctic. So yeah, not too big of a deal. It should be getting better. So I guess we should start talking about your book. The Aether Collection is a series of books about a group of orphans, hence the name of the first book, The Orphans of New Lur. So you and I have talked at length about this series and books because as the narrator, I kind of have to know a little bit. So you mentioned that you started writing this book over a decade ago, or the ideas were implanted over a decade ago?
Yeah, that must have been 2008 or 9. And I was just taking a train back from an internship at Lockheed Martin, and I had the idea of some sort of like each person had an essence or a soul, and if they were killed, you could kind of like almost like Highlander. You know how? Do you ever watch Highlander back in the day?
There can be only one.
Well, and so like if you died and you lost your essence, another human could absorb that essence, and they would get the power. And I guess similar to, I probably just copied all Highlander. They would also get some of that personality too. So is this risk of like, does this human want to become really strong and powerful and with Aether, or do they want to kind of maintain their identity? And then it expanded severely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I've read the book, I have the benefit of I need to read it twice. I read it once just to kind of understand what's going on, and then as I'm narrating it, I'm reading it a second time, and I have picked out so many details that I totally missed the first time around. So I think, from my perspective, now I can't say, hey, everybody, when you write a book, take 10 years, because that's what you need. But I can definitely see the benefit of you taking your time. So the idea was on 2009-ish. When did you actually start writing?
I started, I think I have a bit of a problem of liking to create a whole world and backstory in way too much detail. So like, I don't know, you can see I have a map in the background. It's on a 4x8 piece of plywood, but like literally we only, this where the story takes place is like maybe there or something. So it's
If that, yeah.
right. So, but then I was just making the map and I just kept going. I was like, well, we need to populate the whole thing. And it took me a year to do that map. But so back in 2009, I started with just the concept. Then I was like, well, my story is going to take place in this world, but I need to develop the world first. And so I came up with a backstory. And then I was like, but how did that backstory start? And so I came up with a backstory to the backstory. And then I basically wrote, I was in school back then. So I just had a notebook and I was filling out kind of each book and where I thought they would go, wrote a whole bunch of notes. And then from there, I probably took about 30% of it. I don't know. But so I started, I think by the time I finished college, I had maybe the first 4 chapters kind of really well polished. The part of the problem is I'm doing school for aerospace engineering, which isn't exactly creative writing. So I had to kind of develop quite a bit of the art on the way. So that 10 years wasn't just about, building the actual story, but also developing the skills.
So that's interesting you say that, though. It's something that I've always been fascinated with in my interactions with you. Is I grew up very creative. Like I have an interest in science. Like I remember I was in college and I started taking engineering classes, and after the first 2 weeks, I was like, I hate this. I don't want to make a robot arm. I want to have my arm cut off and they give me a robot arm and I become a superhero. And that's when I realized that my interest in science is no, it's just sci-fi fiction. That's my interest. So I've always had that kind of creative leaning brain. I love fiction, which is why I narrate and do voice acting. So how is it transitioning to having like a very science oriented brain to trying to, okay, cool. So I'm using, is it the right side of the brain for like all of that logical, critical thinking stuff? And then you switch brains to go creative. Like what's that like transitioning from those two different careers?
I don't, I wonder if it might just be that it's a little bit, I think the biggest challenge is presenting, probably like presenting the ideas a little bit differently. Like I probably struggle in meetings as is, like, why aren't people understanding exactly this concept that I'm trying to explain, for some random, did a lot of data analysis at my previous job, and we're
Right.
looking at solar signals and stuff, and I'd do some analysis and people would be like, what are you talking about? And so then I have to like, but it's not so much, I think I've always had that desire to be creative. And I was, always inspired by different story arcs and characters and stuff. So I think that's always been a part of me. So I'm not sure if for me there is like some massive switch between writing and the other parts of my brain. I know at some point it's probably because I don't switch it. I'm just like, so the first book I have like this silly, we talk about energy levels as they're in this competition, and like I spent so much time trying to come up with like the equation to describe like the ratio of these two, and like nobody's going to appreciate it, but
Yeah, like I
like
still do not understand how the Bolt scale works.
no,
I just trust that whatever you say, like, oh, it's a higher number, that's good. But it's other than that, I have no idea what it
yeah,
means.
it's like logarithmic, and like there's an equation and everything, and so
Oh, but that's so cool that you do that, though. You put in that extra work,
yeah.
even if like not everybody can really see the work.
Yeah, so I don't think I actually flip a switch. I just scratch that itch until it disappears, and then I get back to the creative part. So
Sure. No, but also we've talked a lot as well as that you have quite a network of people. You're a very likable person. I mean, I don't like you, but a lot of people do like you. I'm kidding, obviously, but it's cool though that you will lean into your resources. You've amassed people who are very interested in your work and support you. And so I think it's really cool though that I feel like, all right, cool. I do have a bit of a weakness maybe in this bit. I can rock out figuring out uh lunar cycles and when the moon's out and how many suns are in the air. Whereas I'm like, just make it a night scene or make it a day scene. Who cares? You're like, no, 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 no. It has to make sense because I have a calendar and the days of the week. But yeah, it's really neat to watch you do that. Is it a struggle for you to reach out to people for help, or is that something that is just really natural for you to lean on those resources?
that's interesting. I think it's such a weird kind of position because I'm relatively introverted. Like
Hmm.
back in the day, like high school, everybody's like, "You should come out," and I'm like, "Nah." I'm like,
Right.
"I'm good. I'm happy at home by myself."
For sure.
But at the same time, I really do like interacting with people, maybe on or at least I like collaborating, maybe is a
Sure.
better word. And that's one of the things that was really exciting about starting work with you is that we now had this like collaboration on this piece of art to work on. And so as far as reaching out to people, I don't think it is necessarily. I think the hardest thing about reaching out to somebody is first acknowledging that if they give you an opinion, you need to acknowledge that opinion.
Sure.
And that might mean changing something that you think is perfect.
Right.
And so that's probably, in terms of like, I don't have too much of a problem reaching out, but I do make sure that I am prepared to make adjustments and listen to somebody's opinion if I do. And that's, yeah. So,
Yeah, no, because I think as I don't know if it's a human condition or what, but sometimes a lot of people have a hard time reaching out for help. They want to do it all by themselves, and sometimes I feel like that limits them. But so I super do appreciate, like, you are kind of an inspiration for me to widening my network and reaching out to people and using resources. I think that's really awesome that you're able to do that. So like your book, while your name's on the cover, it is an amalgamation of all of these opinions of people that you've reached out to, which I think is awesome. Like I even had some input on some of these books, for me is awesome. It does genuinely feel like a collaboration, and it's been really cool. It's been really fun.
nice.
Genuinely. So yeah, what for you is something you talked about the challenges. Now let's kind of flip it and talk about like something you excel at, or like your most proud moments in your writing.
Let's see. Well, so boy, what do I excel at? Everything has been kind of a layer of improvement.
Sure.
Like right now I take a lot of pride in the characters. I
Yeah.
really feel like I spent a bunch of time giving them depth and making them unique, and that is not just me on the first pass.
Right.
So that's me. Like, I think I must have rewrote the first book multiple times, like rewrote like pretty much 80%, like just crushing each paragraph almost from new and adding a lot of detail with the characters and stuff. And so that's been a lot of that's been due to a lot of feedback from people, and just I think maybe what I do excel at is that somebody gives me a little bit of an idea, and then I'm like, okay, we're going to turn that idea on, and we're going to,
Yeah, you're definitely an ideas guy. Like you get really excited about ideas and you will expand on them like nobody's business, which I think is great.
yeah.
You just
And so
maybe need like a little nudge sometimes.
yeah, and so that was where I remember a few people, people give me suggestions on like, hey, let's get into this person's mind, or what are they thinking now, and so I think from there, that helped me to really flesh out characters more.
Sure.
And then one of my, I think, something else that I'm pretty proud of is just like when I write a first draft, it will be a little bit thin on depth. I'd say, like, we go through A, B, C, D or whatever. But
Right.
then like somehow like these scenes start falling together, and I don't know if it's luck or what, but like I feel like we get to explore these kind of situations in the third book. There's some really exciting scenes that I'm looking forward to people experiencing, but it's like, it turned out like, let's go visit this island, and then like, let's put somebody, maybe some sort of interesting thing on the island, and then it turns into this like really cool exploration of this like ancient facility where they're like, I don't want to ruin it, but it's
Right.
I think one of my strengths would be to build up this like immersive world and these experiences kind of layer by layer, maybe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that is a very strong point that you do. I know it can be frustrating and monotonous, but the fact that you do take time and you go back over your book multiple times, like I can tell. But yeah, no, like I said, I read your book multiple times, and I went back, I'm like, oh, that's like he was hinting at this so early. I had no idea. And then I was looking at other things. I'm like, okay, well, this was here. This is something that I just kind of read as a bedtime story. I didn't even think about it. Like, I wonder, does this come back later? And I was like, I'm reading the whole book and I'm like, oh, it didn't come back. It's got to be in the. I remember I felt really empowered because I had a direct line to the author. I remember that little story time uh, story with Nero where we talked about, and I was like, hey, does this story come back? Like, is this a thing, like a thread? And I remember, I think it was even just a few weeks ago, you're like, hey, finally pulling on that narrative thread. And I got so excited. So I guess we probably should talk about the book itself, huh?
Suppose.
Yeah, I mean,
Or the audiobook.
Audiobook is whatever. I just want to make sure that we actually do cover it. So yeah, what is the book about? Maybe it's a little late in the video to do that. But yeah, what everybody's just like, all they talking about is writing and boo. So what's your book about?
So I would say that it's more about like the series is what I'm trying to write to. I'm not like, I think maybe that's one of my struggles is that I'm writing a series and not necessarily an individual book.
Right.
But and so my whole idea was to capture this like giant adventure as the world's starting to fall into deeper and deeper chaos, and kind of learn about and grow with these characters as they have to take a position to actually help and save the world. And so in order to start this adventure, we start with the orphans. And so this is where I think they're roughly 12 to 15. And so the first book is them just coming they have this section of old industrial district, which I described, where the another race had basically taken over the humans and then oppressed them. And so as these orphans have a day off from school, they want to explore the old industrial district where they pretend that they're part of the Catalyst group. Catalyst, which is the human rebels fighting for equality against the Erosians.
Eros.
And then, and so they basically stumble upon these canisters that have the essences inside. And as they bond with these, it kind of, it takes some people down one route, like of having more abilities. And it takes, one of our main characters, Nero, down a different route where he's now kind of accompanied by this strange kind of presence. And so a lot of the book is learning a little bit about that and helping Nero kind of become a little bit more of a brave soul than just his terrified little, I don't have a good word, but.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he was the runt of the litter. And so a lot of this book, as I experienced it, was him coming out of his shell and having to be forced, like he's alone for some of it, which he's never been alone before. And how does he deal with that? And learning, okay, cool, nothing happened when I opened this canister. All my friends, my family, big things happened right away. Nothing happened. And then him coming to realize that, no, something did happen. It's just not as readily apparent. It's very different. And him, by the end of the book, no spoilers or anything, but he's learned and grown, learned and grown quite a bit as through the book, which I super loved. I loved Nero's journey through this book.
Yeah, so I think that is pretty much the gist of it. And we're kind of like, and so it is a relatively narrow scoped story, the first one, in terms of just following the orphans. We get to visit a couple different cultures, but really we're the world's pretty narrow at this point. I remember on the map, it's like
right.
And then we get to follow Isis, who is actually an Erosian who is working to hunt down these children for part of it. And so it's kind of fun to see where the humans feel like the Catalyst members are rebels fighting for a just cause. The Erosians, on the other hand, are calling them terrorists. And so
right.
And so that is pretty much, I think, the first book.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's a little bit, you know, they're traveling, they're going across the little bit of the continent, I guess, as they do, and they do meet other cultures. I don't know how much experience they would have had with the other races before leaving New Lure, right?
Yeah, New Lure is just old. Well, it's the remnants of a more established city. So the old industrial district is where Lure had a pretty prosperous human settlement, and then the Rosians kind of crushed most of that, and so now they call it New Lure, which is more just a beat down town with
Yeah.
you know, a portion of the industrial capabilities it had before, and so it's I believe 100% human. I don't think there'd be any really anybody
Yeah,
else
I mean
there.
that would make sense though. But so they obviously had a little bit of interaction with Erosians, but they want to avoid them. But other than that, I mean, I know that inside of the Erosian city there are other races, but I mean, I don't think they would have interacted with any of them. So like they do interact then and get to learn about a completely new culture, which is really cool. So I mean, like what the challenges of that, you know, coming up with, you know, doing like fiction within our world is one thing, but you then had to make other races, other like non-humans, and then their cultures and backgrounds. You know, like how does that come about?
With a lot of difficulty. I don't know. It's like uh like again, it's just probably layers. You know, I start to write out kind of the scene. I can write out the whole, you know, a good portion of the book without any you know, deep details on a culture. And then as I, you know, I see where I'm going, I can kind of start to see who these people are, and then I kind of layer on you know, a little bit more depth. Like I made the Brookins have you know, their whole kind of martial arts, their aether abilities are very different from most of the other races. They're better at like interacting with magic than I guess maybe harnessing, interacting, kind of
Yeah, it's
similar.
like
Then
to me, it's like a the way that I understood it was like if Aether was like a battery, they have like a smaller battery, but then more finer like motor control over what the energy that comes out.
yeah, so they can harness a huge amount of aether, but they can't supply that aether.
Right, right,
And
right,
so
right.
whereas other races are going to be a little bit more 50-50. They're going to be able to use aether that kind of is connected, that is um, like part of their essence, or the aether is more the energy. The essence determines kind of the abilities of their um, magical skills. And
Right.
so somebody like typically you'd have it 50-50 where they could supply their own aether and use it. Um,
Sure. I just had a question. Or I just thought of a question for another race that's not in the first book, and I'll have to ask you later about their aether abilities because I'm like, oh yeah, what if blah, 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 blah. So I won't spoil that. Um, that's just so cool though. Like then it was one of my favorite things about magic systems or ability systems where there's nothing that's like impervious. No one's like invincible. Everybody has like pros and cons to their magic. Um, so yeah, like the Brookins are really good at fine motor control, but they don't have a deep well of energy. So I think that makes them so much more interesting and relatable. Even though they are like a mystical, magical being, you know. Uh, so yeah, I don't know. I love that. I love exploring those kind of, and then how do they get into a situation and solve that situation using completely different ability lists, I guess, you know.
yeah, and so a lot of their culture is revolves around their skills. And
Right.
so, you know, they have a physical component for like a martial arts, and then they have like a aether component, which is interacting with aether. They, you know, they have to use certain objects to help to compensate for the lack of their own storage ability of aether. And so, um,
So that's interesting to me. What would, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what would come first then? Was it the culture and background, or the magic? And then you're like, all right, cool, now I'm going to create their culture around the magic that I've given them.
I think I came up with their limitations first. So I said Brookins are going to have, you know, this kind of Aether abilities. And then we developed from there.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's really cool, and like a really good idea for other aspiring writers out there to kind of think like, okay, well, where do I start, outside in or inside out? It's also an actor's thing, you know, how do we get inspired when we do characters? So I love that thing of, we start off with this, and then, okay, what would a culture that has this set of abilities, what would, like, how would they evolve? You know, oh, they're going to be a little bit more physical. They're going to have more martial arts. They're going to have a little bit more technology because of their limitations, as opposed to a culture that's more magically robust, where they maybe not develop that because they don't need it.
Yeah, and that's where the Erosians are. They're on the spectrum where the Brookins don't have necessarily Aether at their fingertips, but they're very capable with Aether. Sure. Erosians, on the other hand, have they're small, and they have very little access to Aether. Their abilities are pretty much non-existent. And so they rely heavily on technology there, and that's part of the, you know, what drove them to the top of the food chain, I guess. I don't know. Able to dominate the humans is because they had these, you know, these technological advancements that were able to surpass the Aether abilities of the humans.
Absolutely. And it's super interesting. You know, they dominate through technology, and just, yeah, they're pretty scary.
And that's a fun outlet for me to get a little bit more sci-fi.
Yeah.
And so I, you know, I'm able to, instead of rely on magic to, you know, get people to accomplish certain tasks, I can use, you know, like we have holographic displays, and they have ships that are able to kind of get around some of the gravitational effects to help them move a little bit easier. They, you know, they giant mechs and different crafts,
missiles, and yeah, like long range communications. It's very cool. You have a unique blend of sci-fi and fantasy, depending on, you know, which culture you're with. It's like almost a completely different world, and how they've evolved. It seems very natural, which I think is really important. That, you know, that everything that these creatures these races and whatnot, like how they exist, makes complete sense. I never stopped and was like, wait, why are they doing this? You know, and I think that's super important. I was never taken out of the story while reading it.
Nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, nice for you. Because for me, I get the benefit of just reading this book and enjoying it, and never going like, what? You know, because that's one of those things that takes you out. So yeah, did I have another question for you? Because we're doing so great that, yeah, no, I think that's about all I got. Do you have anything that you want to add?
I don't think so. I'm completely out of ideas.
No. Well, you know what? I would love to say that that's true, but it's not. You're constantly coming up with ideas, and we're constantly talking about books that aren't even out yet. So with that said, books 1 and 2 are out in print. You have the Kindle version, you have paperback versions, and those are both on Amazon. So you have book 1, the Orphans of New Lur, and then book 2, Catalyst, the Aether Collection Part 2, book 2. And then, yeah, right now the audiobook of the first book is out now, and the audiobook 2 I am currently working on, and hopefully we'll get it out really soon. And yeah, links are below. Buy 3 copies, 1 for you, 1 for a friend, and then 1 for an enemy, because they need this in their life to improve themselves. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Oh, hey, Blake, I want your website so people can check you out.
BlakeVanier.com.
BlakeVanier.com.
/Antira. And I hope to my goal with that website is to really throw a bunch of stuff on there. So I want to have, like, you know, if you're looking to kill some time and want to know more about the whole world, I'm going to be adding maps and more about the different Aether casts in the solar system, which was another pain in the butt.
Yeah, it's for those people who really want to dive deep, which you can with these books. That's what that's for. If you want to just read it and get through the book, like, oh, this is a fun story, and that's it for you, great. You're going to get a great story. But if you want to dig deep, there is a room for that, and I'd love it as a nerd myself. All right, awesome. And you can find out more about me, christianaris.com, for all your voiceover needs. All of them. I got it. All right, everybody. This is nice talking to you. Bye.
Thank you.